So as designers, obviously, we're visual people, and one of the first things we're probably going to want to change are these default typefaces, because this just looks really dated. It looks pretty boring. It's just Times New Roman. So we might want to find some new typefaces. And the way that you do that is generally to link to a service that's going to provide those typefaces. There are several ways you can get different typefaces in your web project. You could download the typeface files, and you could do something called self-hosting them, which just means that you add them to all of the files that are making up your website, and you pull them in that way. But the most common and really the easiest way is to get them from a service. And so as a student at the college, you have access to Adobe fonts. You could look at those, or you could look at Google fonts. Just to make things easy tonight, I am going to look at Google fonts. But know that you could choose for Adobe fonts as well. It's fine with me. The rules are just that you need to choose two different typefaces that pair well together. So I'm going to go to Google Fonts, and I'm going to browse typefaces, and we have a lot of choices, so let me show you how this works. I'm going to open up some filters. I can check based on the type that I'm going to use, so I might want to choose one that's going to work well with my name, and then I might want to choose others that might work with my title. And then I have some choices here as well where I can choose, for example, display faces tend to be really kind of garish to look at for too much text, but you might use them for a headline, for example, for your H1s on every page. Now, where you're going to use these typefaces is up to you. Right now, I just want you to get the experience of selecting some, and you can always change them as you go. These don't have to be the ones that you use. Let's try to keep it somewhat tasteful, though, because a lot of these can start to get really out of hand. But you can see here for display faces, these are, we would want to use these really sparingly for the most case. Let's see, I'm going to choose this dosis as one. And now when I want to use this, the interface gets a little confusing. So I've checked it on. And if I want to use it, I just need to click Get Font. And then you can see that it has given me a shopping cart or a bag that has that typeface in it. And I can either get the embed code or I can download. So I'm going to use the embed code. And it gives me all the code that I need here, but I'm not going to use it yet because I want to choose two typefaces, and I really want to have both typefaces in this code so that I don't have to do this twice. So I'm going to come back and see if I can find a typeface that pairs well with dosis that I've chosen here. This one probably be pretty good for body copy. And so either that, or I might even go thinner for the body copy. Usually, by the way, when we're choosing typefaces for the web, we want to do the opposite of what we do for print. So for print, you're usually told to use sans serif faces, so the faces that don't have feet are sans serif. The little feet are called serifs. And we can see those here. Right? You see how these little lines appear underneath. And serif faces are a little bit more decorative. And usually in print, we would use serif faces for most of the body copy, and we would use sans serif faces for headings. But on the web, it's considered a best practice to do the opposite, to where you might have a sans serif face for most of the body copy, and you use serif faces for your headings. It's just easier to read, easier on the eyes to use sans serif online, according to conventional wisdom anyway. And so now I might come back and look for a serif face that would pair nicely with this that I could use for my headings. So I'm going to go back and take a look at what's available. And I'm going to change my filters to where I'm not looking at display faces anymore. And doesn't want to let me filter anymore. Let's see, let's go all the way back. And for now, just so we don't spend a lot of time with me scrolling through, I'm just going to find a decent serif face that I could use. I'm not sure that I would call this one decent, but we'll give it a try. And I'll click Get Font again. You see now I have two in my cart. And to add them to my project, I just need to put these pieces of code in my project. So the embed code, it tells you to put this code into the head of your HTML. We do need all of it. I'm just going to click the copy code button here, and I'm going to come to my head code, and just under the title I'm going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is write the words Google Fonts, and then I'm going to select those words, and on my Mac I'm going to hold down Command and hit the / button, and what that does is it creates an HTML comment. So this doesn't appear as part of the code. Using comments is a way to be able to have notes in your code. And so again, that was Command and /, or on a PC it would be Control and /, and the / is the same key as the question mark. Then I can paste all of that code that I was given underneath there, and I just want to make sure that I indent it properly. Since these are under that comment of Google Fonts, it might even make sense to come in one more step so that I can see them. And if I look at this, I can actually see that the third link element that I'm being given here mentions both of those typefaces and the available faces or weights that are there as well. And so this is all going to come together to allow me to be able to use those typefaces. But the next thing that Google gives me is this code that helps me to understand how to actually write the CSS that's going to use it. And so again, I'm going to copy that code, and I'm going to move to styles.css, and I'm going to create a CSS comment up here as well. And for now, I'm just going to write the word fonts, and I'm going to do another command and / to make a CSS comment out of that. And I'm going to paste all of this code here. I need to get rid of these slashes. Those slashes are a different languages commenting. And then I'm going to move this asterisk and / down beneath the CSS so that all of it is what we would call commented out. When you comment things out, you're basically disabling them. And so we're putting them in here, but we're disabling them so that they don't affect our code at all, and now we can just read them without having to worry about them breaking our code. And then I'm going to come back, and I'm also going to grab that same little bit of code that's provided for the other typeface, and within the comments, so before that last asterisk and /, I'm going to paste this in here too. And all this does is it gives me the information that I'm going to need later to be able to use it on my website. I don't need it right now. But what I do need to do now is also add an icon font that I can use for this. I'm going to come back to my template, and right under my Google Fonts, I'm going to add another comment of Font Awesome. And Font Awesome is a really good thing for you to know about. It has become somewhat ubiquitous in the world of web design as being the premier icon font that you can use. So what we're going to do is we are going to visit the Font Awesome website, and you can see that at the time of this recording, Font Awesome is on the release number 6, and they have several different ways that you can go about adding this typeface to your website, but what it does is it provides you with icons. So we can look here and we can see that in Font Awesome 6 Pro, so there is a free version, the Pro is the paid version. You can see a bunch of different icons that you can use. And so this has been in development for a pretty long time, I would say about 10 years. And they continue to iterate on it. They continue to advance the language and add additional typefaces and weights and things like that. So you've probably come across this quite a bit just in surfing the web and maybe didn't even realize that you had. But what we want to do is use the free version of Font Awesome to be able to add icons to our website as well. So we've added our Font Awesome heading here that we can use. And this time though, instead of linking to Font Awesome, which we could do, okay, but what we want to do is we want to do something called self-hosting. So why are we doing that for Font Awesome and not for Google Fonts? Well, the reason is that Google has paid for licensing for a lot of the typefaces that are available on Google Fonts. And so for us to download them, we did have that option, by the way, with Google Fonts. We just didn't do it. So we could have. If I come back to my bag here, I could download those typefaces and I could use those as well. But the reason I was choosing to link to them this way is, one, it's a little bit easier, and two, Google tends to be open source, so they tend to have everything from Google tends to be free for the most part until they choose to monetize it, versus, say, Adobe fonts where everything's proprietary and eventually you're going to have to pay for it. So the other reason is just to give you an idea of how you could connect using a link that's hosted at Google versus how you would self-host. So we're going to try two different ways to do this. Ultimately, that decision would be up to you, but it is important to keep in mind that, especially with things like typefaces, they tend to cost money, and so Adobe might have paid for the licensing, and you might have to pay extra for a license if you wanted to be able to download and self-host. So in some cases, it might be a little bit more cost-effective to link to the source that's providing that typeface. Whereas with Font Awesome provides a free version. So the benefit of self-hosting is that if we download that free version and we keep it, then it won't get updated until we choose to update it. So when we're connecting to what's called a CDN, which means Content Delivery Network, from another provider like Google or Adobe, if they chose to remove these typefaces from their product offering, then they wouldn't show up on our website anymore. Whereas if we self-host, we have a little bit more of control over when we update or when we need to change things. So keep that in mind as well. But let's go ahead to Font Awesome and come back to the home page. And you notice we're given some options here as to whether we want to start for free or go pro. We're going to start for free. And this is confusing when you first encounter this because it looks like you have to enter your email to get a kit. You don't. And I probably wouldn't. This gives you a JavaScript piece of code that you can put in the head and you can use. But what we really want to do is self-host. So I'm going to scroll down a little further. And I'm going to choose this download button. And now it's going to ask me, do I want to use it for the web or for desktop? So one cool thing about Font Awesome is you can download the free version for desktop and it'll give you a version or file format that you can use on your computer. So if you were creating mock-ups, say in Illustrator or something like that, you can have these icons there as well. But for now, I am going to choose free for web. And when I download that, I'm going to move into my GRD 188 folder. And for now, I'm just going to download right to there. And once it finishes downloading, I'm going to come to that zip file and extract it. Once I do that, I can get rid of the zip file. And then I'm going to move some of the files from this folder into the folders in the rest of my site. To do that, I probably need to change the way that I'm viewing this. So I'm going to come to this icon and I'm going to view as columns now, so that way I can move around in the project a little bit more. And this is a lot of stuff. Okay, if I come to the Font Awesome website, they will tell me how to host Font Awesome myself. So I can read through all of this, and you really want to get in the habit of reading through the documentation of resources when you're working on the web, because they change constantly and they constantly evolve. And so this website will look different, 6 months from now. So if you really want to use it, you just need to be comfortable with learning how and just know what options you should expect. You should be able to expect to self-host or to connect to a CDN, and then there'll be certain instructions that you need to follow. I'm going to save you a little bit of time on that for now and just tell you what you need to do. What we need to do is take this web fonts folder and we just need to move that into our project. So it needs to be at the very top of GRD 188 as a separate folder, along with our image folder, our downloads folder, and our CSS folder. And then we need to come in and we need to use some CSS, but Font Awesome gives you a lot of different style sheets so that you can pick and choose what parts of the icon face you want to use. For us, we're going to just take the whole kitchen sink. We're going to use this file called all.min.css, and I'm just going to take that and move that into my own CSS folder. And then I don't need any more of the Font Awesome download, so I can delete that as well. Once I do that, I just need to get the style sheet into my HTML so that I can use it. So when we connected to Google Fonts, since we were connecting to Google's web resources, we used an absolute path in the href attribute. We connected to the entire URL because we had to get there. But now we're self-hosting Font Awesome. So our Font Awesome style sheet is within our files on our website. So to be able to connect to it, we need to use what's called a relative path, a document relative path. We talked about that a little bit here where we were linking to pages, but this is our first opportunity to type one from scratch. So to connect to a style sheet, we need to use this link element in the head of our file. Notice I am here before head closes. And I'm going to use the link element. It needs to have a rel attribute that is going to be style sheet. And then it needs to have an href attribute. And in that href attribute, I wouldn't copy one of these Google ones, by the way. It has some extra attributes that we don't need. For a self-hosted relative file, we just need the link element with the style sheet value for the rel attribute, and then the href just needs to be a relative path that, as relative to template, leads to all.min.css. So in this case, as relative to template, all.min.css is inside a folder named CSS. So I first call out CSS, and since it's a folder, I have to type a /, and then I just give the file name. So that's going to be all.min.css. And oops, that's it. That's the whole link for Font Awesome. So I can save that. And now the last thing I want to do is go ahead and get that link to my custom style sheet in here as well. I want that to be the last style sheet that I call. So what I'm doing right now is just copy pasting my Font Awesome code, and I'm going to change the comment to read custom styles. And then I'm going to update my relative path. Instead of leading to all.min.css, I'm going to change all.min to styles.css. And then that completes the head code for my template. And if I've done this right, I should be able to use all of these pieces of code to change the look of my website, which we will be doing in the next phase of our project. For now, though, we need to focus on making a couple of updates to the body as well. So we're going to do that. And then in our next phase of our project, we'll start applying all of this. But long story short, what you want to make sure you've done is selected some fonts from either Google or Adobe Fonts. Adobe Fonts works very similarly to Google, by the way. And you want to make sure that you are self-hosting Font Awesome and that you have linked to your custom style sheet as well. And note that for the ones that we're self-hosting, we use a relative path. So the relative path always tells the browser where the resource that we're linking to is as relative to the page that we are on. So hopefully that's starting to make sense. It takes a little bit of time to wrap your head around that sometimes. So if it's not yet, don't worry, it will soon. But so far we're in pretty good shape. So let's do one more video where we talk about updates to the body, and then we'll be ready to use some CSS in our next phase.